Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
Hey listeners, for this episode of 16 to 1, we're spotlighting the work of the journalists at the Reporting Project, a nonprofit news organization based at Denison University in Granville, Ohio. My co-host Katie and I both call Licking County, Ohio home, and we've seen firsthand how the Reporting Project enriches our community, strengthening civic engagement and elevating stories that would otherwise go untold. Amidst ongoing turbulence in higher education, it was such a huge breath of fresh air to visit Denison's campus and speak with thoughtful, engaged storytellers about how collaborative reporting is restoring broken connections and transforming our communities. To learn more about the Reporting Project, visit thereportingproject.org. We met with the team at what felt like the very, very top of the hill, the nickname given to the Denison campus by locals, where we found Barney Davis Hall, a towering brick structure topped with wide arches in Renaissance Revival style. Up several floors via elevator and one final set of wide stairs, we climbed and emerged into a cozy loft space crisscrossed by string lights, decorated with seasonal ornaments.
This is the room where we do all of our meetings and all of our work together. It's a bunch of small tables pushed together into one large conference table.
Yeah.
We've got whiteboards all over the walls, and we are surrounded by large desktop computers for audio and video editing. These computers all run like the latest editing tech for all of our students who are working on multimedia projects. But we meet here every Monday for a couple of hours to talk about stories. We treat it like a newsroom.
Our guests this episode are Jack Shuler and Alan Miller, experienced journalists and faculty members in Denison's journalism program, Julia Lerner, managing editor of the Reporting Project, and Caroline Zollinger, recent Denison graduate, editor, and reporter. We spoke first with Jack and Alan.
My name is Jack Shuler. I'm the director of the journalism program, and my relationship to the Reporting Project is... what's my relationship, Alan?
Yeah. Founder. Visionary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like Alan, I wear a lot of hats around here.
I'm Alan Miller. I am a teacher and mentor, and for the Reporting Project, I do wear many hats. I love reporting, and so I do a lot of that. I also edit and post stories to the website and work with students during their reporting, and mostly I have fun.
I'm a professor here at Denison, came here to teach early American literature and Black studies. I'm in the English department. As a writer, I began to do more stories that were focused on the community around me, in part because when I came here, I had no children, then I had one child, and I was still able to travel. And I'm from the South originally, so a lot of my research and writing was in the South, and then I couldn't travel as much as I would like to, and I just started looking for stories in my backyard, and I started reporting out those stories. And in 2016, when Donald Trump was elected the first time, before that, I'd been pitching stories to editors for magazines and news sites that were on the coast, right? And when Donald Trump was elected, a lot of editors on the coast were like, what is going on in America? We don't know. Obviously, we are not paying attention to America. Let's send some journalists from New York City to Ohio to tell the story. And I was really baffled by that. In fact, one of the outlets I wrote for did something very much like that. So I actually got together with some friends here and from Ohio, but also from beyond, who were writing in the middle of this country, and we created something called Between Coasts, and it was a series of forums that were held here at Denison. One was held in Chicago with Medill, and the other was held in downtown Newark, and then the last one we held in Lincoln, Nebraska. And at those forums, we talked a lot about how do we tell the stories of the places where we live, how do we push them out to the coast. At the same time, at Denison, we had started a program, a concentration in narrative journalism, and I started that with my colleague Margot Singer and a few others, And we were getting more students involved in journalism and interested in journalism. So I'm learning in these two various ways, right? I'm teaching classes where I'm getting students to write stories about their community. And then I'm learning from all these people who are doing amazing stuff around the country. I think sometime around 2017, 2018, a local ne'er-do-well said, y'all should start a newspaper. And that idea just kind of like went back in the back of my mind, and I just kind of let it sit there. And then 2020 happened and everything was shut down. That was when I started working closely with Alan and a group of other faculty to create the journalism program, which we had to push through the faculty and create this major. This year we're graduating 18 majors. Just 2 years ago, we only had 2 majors. So we have about 90 as graduates. We have about 90 majors and minors now. The other thing that happened in 2020 was that Doug Swift, who was a core part of the narrative journalism program from the beginning, we worked with Maggie Messett, who was working as a Mellon Fellow, to create a website to post all the cool stories that our students were creating. And a whole bunch of those stories were created in one of Doug's classes. In the spring of 2020, his students were working on stories that were rooted in Licking County. They were multimedia stories, and then everything shut down. And all these students went home, and they just sort of left these stories. And he said, well, why don't you write about or create stories about what's happening in your homes? And those stories were incredible. And I was like, we need a place to put them. So for years, we've been asking the University Communications Department to create a website for us. They were very busy. We were not as busy. So we created a website. I just, out of a hat, said, let's call it The Reporting Project. And so we got the domain name and all that. And in December of 2020, the website went live. This is actually true. I sent the website to Adam Weinberg. I said, what do you think about this? He's like, this is amazing. I was like, cool. So that was it. And
President blessed it.
Yeah, he blessed it.
You asked for forgiveness instead of permission, and it worked.
Well, that was a time where people were trying a lot of things out, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That worked for us because we needed connection with the world because we were all closed in. So that was it. We did a series in the winter of 2021 with Newark Advocate. It was called Black Lives in Licking County and the NAACP. And we did a whole bunch of stories in February about the history and present of people of color in Licking County. At that point, we were meeting randomly. We were trying to get students involved. We were pulling teeth kind of at that point. But then we started meeting once a week. That was the big deal. We started meeting once a week. But we still weren't quite, we weren't doing it as regular, right? Alan came in a really opportune moment. I can't imagine a better moment because Alan retired and then he came to be a part of the journalism program full-time. And Intel made its announcement.
I had been teaching here one course a semester for 23 years, while also working at the Columbus Dispatch, where I worked for 37 years, having started there as the Licking County reporter for the Dispatch, eventually working my way to become the editor of the paper. And I really wanted to get back to what drew me into journalism in the first place, and that was doing local news. It worked out perfectly that I was leaving the Dispatch regardless of what was happening here. But what was happening here was that a major had been approved, and we had all these students who were passionate about doing journalism, and this website that was just waiting to be filled. And it was January of 2022. Intel announces that it's going to build this big campus in Licking County, and we were casting about for what we might want to plant our flag in. So we kicked around a bunch of possibilities, and then we decided, well, how often do you get out on the ground floor of something as big as this? And so we decided we're not going to cover the business aspect of this because everybody else is going to, and we're not really equipped to do that. But what we can do is cover the ripple effects of something this big, kind of do our best to look around corners and see into the future and figure out how Licking County residents could be affected by this. And that took us to all sorts of places: education, transportation, agriculture, the environment, housing, so many topics that we could take on. So that's kind of how the ball started rolling in terms of our regular contributions to the website. And it's really evolved since then.
One of the things that I think is unique about what we're doing is that we've tried from the beginning to have a collaborative model. We look at all the stories. I mean, any story that goes out has lots of eyeballs on it. I think we edit our stories pretty damn well. But even in that first couple of weeks, we did a story together. We wrote a story together as a community.
8 of us. I thought when Jack proposed this, I thought this is going to be a disaster. 8 people working in the same file, and it was amazing.
And I think even though we don't always sit down and write stories together, although some of the coolest things that we do involve sending out lots of people on one day or to one event or to one, to cover one thing that's happening in the world, and we get all these different voices, right? But when we work on stories together, and everybody has their own personality in those documents. Some of us edit everything very, very closely, and some of us just read. And but we're all working together, and we're creating these stories together, which is really kind of wonderful, I think, in a world of journalism that increasingly encourages people to be on their own and not work together. I want our journalists to be able to do all the things, but I also want them to be a part of a community that's working together. There's so much in the world right now that wants us to be separate. And I think the more we work together, even in our daily lives,
well, it has built a community. It's the most egoless newsroom or community that I've ever worked in. I mean, everybody is pulling in the same direction without seeking credit for it. All about helping each other elevate the work that we're doing, because ultimately we see this as a community service. We're doing a public service by providing news that Licking County residents will not get anywhere else, unless, of course, it's picked up by one of the other news organizations, which we encourage. We make everything we produce free to any news organization that wants to publish it. And we hope that they do, because when they do, it amplifies. It's like putting a megaphone to what we're doing. And also, it provides our students with this tangible evidence of the work that they do, so that when they leave here and start interviewing with hiring managers, they can say, I was published on the Reporting Project, I was published in the Columbus Dispatch and the Newark Advocate, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, on and on.
Do you think that a nonprofit news model lends itself more easily to that kind of collaboration?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of things that we wouldn't be doing this. We wouldn't have, the technology in this room if it wasn't for people who are supporting the journalism program. We wouldn't be doing what we're doing without the support of the administration that's, supporting the work we're doing. I think what's important to realize is, or at least the more and more that we're doing this, I realize on this campus, at least, people know what we're doing and they're really supportive of it. And so any way that they can help us. So there's collaboration beyond just our newsroom. That is really important. Collaboration in the community. So is it more possible? For sure. Because I think they know what the stakes are, right? They all have skin in the game. They know what happens in a community when you lose news. People come up to me now, and this is a new experience. It's only started to happen in the last few months. They come up to me now because they know I'm at Denison and that I work in journalism, and be like, do you know about the Reporting Project? I mean, they're doing really good work. That's cool, because people understand that it matters, that a community needs to have verifiable sources of information.
Well, and having us out there, I mean, we live here, also puts our community in touch with journalists. They can see that we as journalists, writ large, we're not these enemies of the people or people who live in faraway places and report about their community. We live here. We care about this community. That doesn't mean that we always write stories that everybody's going to like, because sometimes there are hard things that we have to report about. And not everybody likes that. But at the end of the day, what I hope they will acknowledge when they see those stories about hard things is that they'll say that we were fair, and that these stories were written by people who live here and care deeply about this community. My point in all of that is that I hope that by being more present in doing local journalism, that our community will see that our colleagues who work for the Associated Press or the Washington Post or the New York Times are regular people like us who are just trying to do good work.
In all of this, it's important to remember that we're educators, right? So like the students get all these clips and that's really great, but they're also learning how to go out in the world and talk to people and learn about a community. Really important basic things about being a citizen or being a member of a community that are they're hard for anybody. Ultimately, that's what we're doing. I don't think all of our students are going to go on to be journalists, but they're going to have had this experience where they were entrusted with sharing a story with a community. And that's a pretty cool thing.
If there are kind of gaps in trust, do you find your students encountering any of those obstacles? Are you talking through those kinds of things where it's like, what if people are like shut the door in your face when you show up to ask them questions, that kind of thing?
Happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it absolutely happens. And it's happened to our students. And it's happened to the journalists from the reporting project. And it happens to me. All the things that they go through, we go through, right? There was a student yesterday who was really concerned about a story that she was working on. And like, I totally felt it. Like, I get it. I totally understand it because I feel the same way about stories all the time. So we feel that. So we can talk them through those situations a little bit, the trust stuff. You know, my line is always when people say like, oh, well, the media this and the media that. I'm like, I'm the media. You know, what are you talking about? What do you mean by that? Ask questions. You know, and sometimes people just slam the door and you have to.
It's pretty rare, though, I would say.
It is.
My experience throughout my career, it's been pretty rare. And for students, experience it occasionally, but I think more often than not, they're welcomed. I mean, people are eager to tell their stories and make sure that this community knows what's going on around them.
I'm kind of surprised by that. I figured it would have been more common, but maybe that's just my own read of it as well. People are just so hungry to know anything. The lack has been felt so sorely for so long that I think people are just like, oh my gosh, anybody is saying anything about what's happening, you know. It's great to know that what's happening across the street, I'm glad you all can find out, because we can't.
I am Julia Lerner. I'm the managing editor of the reporting project.
My name is Caroline Zollinger, and I'm a senior journalism major at Denison, and I'm an editor and a reporter for the reporting project.
Caroline has been with us longer than most of our student reporters. She started the summer going into your junior year?
Yes. I was working for the reporting project with Doug Swift, and Doug just came up to me and he was like, what do you want to work on this summer? And I was like, I don't know anything about what goes on off this hill. And he suggested that I go to this little village called Alexandria that's right by Granville. And they were having this asphalt plant proposed right by Raccoon Creek, and everyone was concerned about the air and the water, and he suggested that I go over there and see what people are concerned about. And I went to a lot of EPA meetings that summer. Yeah. So I was a journalism major. Okay. I was looking for something to do in the summer, and I heard about the reporting project, so I applied and got it. And it was just me and one other girl working on this.
Caroline continued to show up, and I know it was probably a little strange and awkward the first couple of times, but now you're just a regular. You show up at the village council meetings. Hey, Caroline, how's it going? Yeah. Everyone knows you.
Yeah.
You've got a beat.
Yeah, I definitely have a beat. Mm-hmm. It was a little uncomfortable at first. I'd never been to a zoning or trustees meeting, and I kind of stick out because I'm like a 5'3" little girl.
Yeah. There's a lot of formalities in those meetings, like who can talk when and stuff like that.
In St. Albans and Alexandria is in St. Albans Township.
Right.
It's a little less formal.
Sure.
A little bit more yelling at each other.
Okay, so you were in the thick of it.
Yes.
Okay.
Doug was like, just go to this trustees meeting.
You didn't know what you're walking into?
I didn't know what a trustee was. Now I do, for sure.
Yeah, you do. That's what matters. You're saying it like it's a bad thing, but that's actually just how people learn anyway. think that that's exactly the value of the sort of reporting that you all do, is that you take these issues that are hard to navigate, hard to get through to people about why they're important, and you turn them into something that is not only valuable, but just like compelling, I think. I wanted to back up a little bit because I'm not sure that everybody who will be listening is familiar with the term narrative journalism. Can you, either of you, speak to what that means for you, for your publication?
I do sort of wish Jack and Ellen were still here to answer that, because they created this as a narrative journalism concentration. Sure. And it eventually evolved into what it is today. But it really is taking journalism and making it beautiful to read, is kind of how I think about it. There's the very traditional news reporting that we also teach, of course, here. We call it like a 5 W's intro, where it answers the who, what, when, where, why. And then the how, of course, comes later. But narrative journalism, you want to read narrative journalism. It puts you in the place where you're inside this zoning board meeting where a trustee is looking at you and yelling at you because you need a better PR team. That's one of my favorite quotes from the story Caroline worked on a couple years ago. It puts you in the moment, it puts you in the scene, and it makes you want to know more. That's really how I think of it. We teach our students here to get creative with their storytelling and have fun with it.
These small towns, as I'm sure you've discovered, you can live in them almost your entire life and still feel like and be treated like an outsider. But I'm curious about your sort of sense of place building, both as a student but also as a reporter. And you were talking about getting off the hill, Denison being the university where we're recording this up on a really large hill. My car was struggling to get up the hill.
The e-brake is on.
Yeah, the emergency brake is on right now. Yeah, I'm just curious what it's been like for you. What's it like to build that kind of connection to a community, particularly as a student?
Yeah, it's really rewarding. I really enjoy writing about the same place because I get to go back and see the same people, and they do recognize me, but also they give me feedback. And they're like,
sure they do.
Good feedback. They're like, thank you so much for doing this. And it's
good.
Really rewarding. Like, I can see the effects of what I'm doing. I say at first I walked in and I stick out. And of course I still stick out. But everybody recognizes me now because it's the same people going back. So I feel welcome. I just sit and listen, and it's kind of nice to just sit there and listen to what's going on.
I'm curious about how you think you have grown as a storyteller during your time for the reporting project.
I have grown so much, and I'm really thankful that I get to get off the hill to report, because before I was part of the reporting project, everything I had done was on campus, which is great, and it's good work to do as well. But I did not realize how important journalism was until I went into a community and started writing about it. I'm just really thankful to have connected with people in that community as well, and I'm going to be really sad to leave it when I graduate.
Yeah. Do you feel like there are stories that you can kind of sink your teeth into that are unique because you're student journalists? You're bringing a unique voice and a unique perspective.
That is a really hard question.
I do think part of what allows us to do some of these stories is having the community support. Kind of like you were talking about earlier, there is still a little bit of a mistrust for the mainstream media. They see all of the media, in air quotes, of course, as like a boogeyman. And then they see Caroline walk in, and Caroline's always got a smile on her face, and, hey, how's it going, everyone? She's not some boogeyman. She's Caroline, who just wants to tell people stories. And that's with all of our reporters. So I think that has given us a little bit of an edge, a little bit of a benefit, because people like us and they trust us.
Yeah.
They trust us to get it right. And that's the most important thing I think we can do.
Yeah. I mean, Denison's well respected and has been for a long time. I think that aligning with an institution that is so well respected
and an institution that's been
trust.
So supportive of us.
For sure.
Like Jack and Alan were saying, the president of our university is so excited to share what we're doing.
That's incredible.
It means so much to have that level of support from them, too.
I'm motivated because I want other communities in other parts of the country to follow a model like this. I'm wondering how central another nonprofit program, the existing community support and buy-in that can be afforded by those sorts of institutions, they seem to be pretty important. and leveraging those connections and making sure that leaders at those places are on board seems to be, for longevity at least.
We do have a network. It's called the Center for Community News, has kind of reached out to communities across the country. We're part of that. It's all newsrooms that are almost entirely student staffed and run by faculty members of a journalism or an English or a comm program. And so we do these like weekly, monthly, sometimes calls with other educators. We're all going to a conference in October. I'm really looking forward to that. We are not alone in what we're doing. I think we've been really successful in what we're doing, in part because our university is so supportive. And I think other universities have not had such privilege and luck. But there's it's a growing community because they see that this model is working effectively.
You are all winning awards. Journalistic Impact Award, which local independent online news publishers this was recent, right?
That was last year. So for 2024, we won that award from Lion Publishers, which we are so proud of. They give that award to news organizations that have had a significant impact in their communities. We won that for the micro and small tier news organizations, meaning staffs under like 50 people, I think. I don't remember what the cutoff is, but we are one of the larger newsrooms in Central Ohio with our staff of 12 reporters and 4 and 5 faculty members. Part of what success looks like for us is continuing to grow. We love winning awards, but that's not really why we do this. We do this to have an impact in our own community. We have added a lot of partnerships in the last couple of months. So one of the things that we do, we're partnered with WCLT, the local radio station. So we read the news each week. We read little news snippets, like 30-second long story snippets. They play them on the air. They post them on their website. We're also partnered with the League of Women Voters of Licking County. We have what we call the Observers Collaborative. And that is, there are not enough journalists in Central Ohio and Licking County to make it to every public meeting that exists. When we counted it all out, there's like 30 public meetings each week between village councils, township trustees, school boards, zoning boards, the county commissioners. There's never going to be enough reporters. So one of the things that we do is we offer training to the League of Women Voters of Licking County, and they send out trained observers to take notes at all of the meetings. They then turn in those reports to the league. The league lets us look at them, and we can say, shoot, we weren't at that Newark City Council meeting, but we can write about what happened, and we can reach out to the council members. So we've got eyes and ears everywhere.
I can't even imagine starting in a journalism program now with the way that people expect communication to happen, how student journalists are being asked to rise to that challenge, because it's chaotic. You don't know if the platforms that you might be trying to use to build an audience are just going to disappear at any given moment.
Or be taken over by
billionaires. Or hostile whoever, governments or... I mean, especially for small newsrooms, this is hard, but like that process of building community, especially in times when people are expecting this really high intensity, constant onslaught of, I'll call it information, not just news, but people who want to go into journalism now. How are they being equipped?
Well, I'm sure Caroline can talk about some of the classes that she has taken here at Denison, but we try to treat our students as a little bit of jacks of all trades. All of our students, they write, they take photos, they take videos, they post on social media. We try to offer as many different courses as we can, and we also partner with different departments. So, there are classes offered in data analytics. There are classes offered in, one of my favorite examples is science writing.
Yes.
And that is taught by Eric Clemetti. He's a volcanologist by trade, so he does volcanoes, and he teaches here at Denison.
No way. There are not very many active volcanoes around here.
Denison.
Yeah.
He did a lot of his work out in the Washington, Oregon area where I was living for a couple of years. So he and I got to talk a lot about volcanoes out there. But he actually teaches up here in this space because he teaches, they do an annual podcast story. They have to do science reporting.
So cool.
In podcast form. So we're trying to train the students to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And also, because we're a liberal arts program, they get the opportunity to take classes in any subject that they could ever dream of. A couple of our students went out last week and worked with an entomologist at Denison, and they spent an hour in her lab just looking at mosquito larvae. there's a little bit of something for everyone here.
Yeah, there is.
And we let our students specialize. Caroline has really carved out a beat for herself in Alexandria and like public community meetings. We've had students in the past who love sports. So they write about high school football and basketball. And one of our students actually ended up going to March Madness to cover women's basketball a couple of years ago.
Oh, that's really cool.
One student who just loves to write about the library.
What's the weirdest story that you worked on?
Oh, that's an easy question.
Okay.
The Pirate Festival?
Yeah, the Pirate Festival.
The Buckeye Lake Pirate Festival?
Yeah.
Yep.
Isn't it coming up again in just a couple
it's
weeks?
like 3 weeks away, 2 weeks away.
Are you
And
going to
we
go back and cover it again?
Unfortunately,
No, thank you.
We'll have graduated.
It's so sad that you're going to miss
But I am
the
trying to entice we have a couple of students staying for the summer. I'm trying to get them to be
Go to
here
the
for
Pirate
that.
Festival.
But you've worked on some really, really amazing stories throughout your year.
What was the most challenging one that you've worked on?
The most challenging stories I wrote were in the beginning because I was learning all of this environmental protection agency lingo and zoning lingo, tax lingo, literally looking up everything while I'm just like sitting there. Everything took me way longer than it does now because I didn't know, I didn't understand what was going on, but I wanted to record it and write a story. So I think definitely like my earliest stories were the hardest ones to work on.
And I'm thinking about when you worked on, was it last semester, about the Alexandria Police Department?
Yeah.
It can be hard to say like, hey, the village isn't funding the police department the way they need to be. And that's kind of what all of our sources told us. They did restart the police department last year, and we were excited to report about that. But one of the challenges is the village of Alexandria has very little funding. Residents continue to vote down levies, and there's been issues with that. And so the police department, like, they didn't have the necessary safety equipment that police officers are supposed to have. Things like bulletproof vests, they were having to provide themselves. And it can be a little nerve-wracking to write, like, these are people that Caroline has got to know really well over the last couple of years.
Local levies have been failing left and right around us, and in the absence of local journalistic institutions, school leaders, community leaders don't know how to start those conversations. And I think that that's where, I mean, it's just really shining the power of local journalism to step in and get people talking to one another, because that's just not, otherwise it doesn't happen. It has to be cultivated.
Well, and in places like, Alexandria and St. Albans Township and Buckeye Lake, these levies come down to a handful of votes each time. And everyone knew about the November election last year. You couldn't go outside without hearing about the November election. There's an election coming up in a couple of weeks, and people don't know that it's happening. And there's, I think, 26 issues on the ballot. Like, there's statewide issues, there's levies, there's school bonds. Like, there's all sorts of things on the ballot, and it's going to come down to a couple of votes because if people don't know about it, they don't know to show up to vote. And so we're trying to make sure that people know about it so that they can show up.
Yeah. I'm curious how your relationship with like mentors and faculty advisors and things here has shaped your practice of the craft or just your outlook on journalism.
When I got my internship, like the first thing I did was email Julia because I knew that I'm getting like emotional. I knew she wanted to know, and I know that they all care about me. I'm going to be really sad to leave. I've created great relationships here, and I know I can always come back and visit.
Yeah.
And Caroline was actually one of the first students I met when I first started teaching at Denison.
Really?
I started in October 2023, and Caroline was a junior. I started with 4 students. We would not be functional the way we are today without those 4 students. I went to a state school, University of Maryland, go Terps. My graduating class was like 7,000 people.
Sure.
We didn't really develop relationships with faculty the way that I think students here at Denison get to. I'm going to be so sad when all of these students leave, but I'm also so proud of them and what they've been able to do here and where they're going next. So
I don't know. Small liberal arts colleges, I think, are uniquely positioned to do really well at this.
Absolutely. Being able to talk to everyone who works on this campus and having them, supportive of what we do, like, it's amazing to have all of those resources here. And all of our students come in with different interests and backgrounds. And I don't know if we have any students at the reporting project this semester that aren't journalism majors, but most of our students have another major or a minor on top of journalism because it's something they care about and are interested in. And the liberal arts education lets them explore more. I think there is real curiosity and the opportunity to explore that. So all of our students come in with questions and they get to find answers.
Yeah.
And it helps that we have people like Alan Miller, Jack Shuler, Doug Swift, and Beth Lossing to help us with that.
Do you have any more stories going out?
Yes.
Yes. Graduation is close, but still
Yes.
something coming?
A few more
Okay.
in the works.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, right now I'm working on a story about the truck traffic in Alexandria. There's just a lot of big semis going through a really small main street that's only 2 lanes.
Yeah.
So I'm gathering information.
Can I ask Caroline to talk a little bit about election coverage? Because that's something we've done a lot.
So in November, we tried to cover every issue on the ballot, I believe. And we all picked people who were running for judge.
Licking County races.
Yeah,
So,
Licking County races.
municipal courts, Court of Common Pleas.
County commissioner.
Yeah.
So we all picked people to profile. That way the community knew each candidate, who they were voting for. And then we all sat up here waiting for the results to come in, pre-wrote stories.
Yeah.
Then once the results came in, we called them up real quick to get some quotes, and then we put those stories out like ASAP. I've never done anything like that. Usually I have a lot more time and I don't pre-write stories, but it was a great experience.
On the day of, we actually sent reporters out, not to every polling place in the county. We couldn't get to all of them, but TRP reporters, every single one of them was able to go out into the field and do exit polling effectively. That day, we conducted more than 100 interviews with Licking County voters. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of, because that's 100 voices that would not ever be heard otherwise. And, we don't agree politically with all of them. That doesn't matter when it comes to community journalism. What matters is we were able to share their lives and their stories with our readers for the day. Part of our ability to do this has been community support. We have been able to work so closely with the Granville Community Foundation and the Licking County Foundation, as well as private donors, families, groups, organizations, and their support has been invaluable. And it's not just financial, it's also, they email us every time they have a new story idea, and we get to talk to new people. So
What does that partnership building look like?
one of the things that we do a lot is we go to all sorts of community meetings. We go to Rotary clubs, we've been to Kiwanis meetings, we do luncheons, we do talks, we go to church organizations, and we just tell them what we do. Honestly, that's something that we love to do. We go to all of these meetings, we spend an hour talking about, these are some of the stories we've put out, this is how we do it. Do you have any questions for us? Because a lot of these people have not met a journalist in their community in a long time. And so being able to put the face to the name is excellent and part of what we like to do in terms of building community and building support for what we do. And that's always it's always a great experience, because we go, we talk, we share photos, we share videos, we share stories, and then we are flocked with, oh my gosh, do you know what's happening in your community? Do you know this person? And you need to write about. So the last one we did, we actually went to, was it Rotary or Kiwanis? Yeah, because we had to sing the song. We started talking, and a woman came up to us and said, I have an idea for a bright spot, which bright spots are these things that we publish every week. They're 200 word snippets, because we hear so much. The news is too depressing. I don't read the news. And we like to share really bright moments. And it's been fun. I got to share my engagement as a bright spot a couple of weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited about it. But she came up and she said, I have this great idea for a bright spot. Have you heard of these migratory salamanders at Dawes Arboretum? And I said, that is not a bright spot. That is a whole feature-length story. Yeah. How can I get our reporters out there? So they got to go out. They had these red light headlamps on. They got to go out with the scientists and find these salamanders at Dawes Arboretum and do a whole story about it. And so that's one of those things where people come up to us and they say, this might be interesting to you. Yes. It is. We always want to hear their stories. We want to know everything that you find interesting, because if you find it interesting, someone else is going to.
You're right.
I hear this all the time from even like, not my immediate family, but
Sure.
news is dying. Journalism is dying.
Yeah.
And it's just not.
Yeah, it just looks different.
It's just not. It's changing. It's changing pretty rapidly. We're figuring out how to catch up with it. But it's not dying. And, the more young people we can get involved, the better off we'll be.
You're right.
I think you've got the right approach too by treating it as a more holistic craft. It's not just sitting at a desk and writing, or not just going to the meeting and interviewing. It's also forming all of these community connections and like being present on social media and talking to people, trying to meet people where they are is, I think, as much of a challenge as anything as writing the piece. But I think that's where the quality of your storytelling really shines, because I think it does that really well. It even stands out. It just stands out because it's just good. It's just good.
Can't be good writing.
Yeah, you really can't.
Doesn't work for you.
Congratulations.
All right.
Yeah. Just a final thing. We always ask everybody who comes on one thing they've learned in the last couple of weeks.
I wish Alan was still here. He could talk about learning what crashing out means.
Oh, he could have. I have something.
Okay.
I can go.
You kick us off.
I don't know if you all saw this. I know you said you weren't on TikTok, but there was a beach whale in Huntington Beach in California, according to this woman on TikTok. She was saying that they bring them up and they investigate those whales because their health is indicative of the ocean health. So that's actually how we learn the ocean's health, is by dead whales.
Yikes.
So I spent a lot of time reporting on the West Coast.
Yeah, if you were in Seattle, you were,
we and it's a little bit more than environmental health. Orcas are the ones that we see up north, killer whales. And they are a keystone species. So when orcas start dying and disappearing, that's when we know we're in crisis.
Really?
So there are... See, this is like I get really nerdy about whales specifically.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I knew something, but
there are the resident orcas, and then there are the transient orca pods. And the transient orca pods travel up the west coast, up into Canada.
Okay.
And the transient orca pods have been seeing a little bit of population growth in the last couple of years, which is awesome because they were really not doing well. And so the transient orca pods, at least one of those whales has given birth to calves in the last 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
Which is awesome. It's something that I get really excited about.
That's very fascinating.
So,
I just didn't know that a whale.
And it's really interesting in parts of the West Coast because there are indigenous communities out there, especially in the Seattle, Oregon area, that are linked to orca populations. So they call them their brothers under the ocean, their brothers under the water. So whenever like a whale will show up and is unhealthy, the indigenous communities, like, they'll hold events for it. They'll do all sorts of really cool things.
Interesting.
There was a whale, Tokate, who was captured when Tokate was a very young whale, and she was from the waters near the Lummi Nation, which is one of the communities that I used to report on in Bellingham, Washington. And so this whale was housed at the Miami Seaquarium for like 60 years.
Jeez.
And it died like 2 years ago. It was devastating. But there were so many ceremonies that happened for community members who like were able to finally, because the whale's ashes were brought back to the Lummi Nation. So they were finally able to like put this whale to rest. This is something that I really talk about because I spent so many years reporting about it. So
things I would never know.
That's fascinating.
I'm sorry you have to follow that. Do you have anything that... Do you have a special interest? Or that's not Alexandria?
I had something funny to say that I learned.
That works.
Yesterday, one of my friends is from England, and she was telling me that Americans are really loud. And she was like, you're soft-spoken here, but if you went to Europe, you'd be so loud.
And is she like soft-spoken, or are they soft-spoken?
No.
Oh, so it's just an attack. That's just an attack. That's not even...
She's always teaching me
That's
things.
a neg.
There you go. Always learning.
Hey listeners, thanks for supporting 16 to 1. We're your co-hosts. I'm Chelsea Adams.
And I'm Katie Day. Find our show notes, archives, and resources, sign up for our newsletter, or get in touch with us via the contact form at 16to1.com, all spelled out.
We are so grateful for our listener support. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the show and telling your friends or colleagues about it.
The show is edited and produced by you, Chelsea Adams, and you're also responsible for our show's music.
And you, Katie Day, serve as lead researcher and social media manager.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show.
I'll leave it at
Okay,
whales.
okay.
I am struggling to think of anything
That's fine.
besides the whales right now.
I like the whales. It could be more about whales too.
You have a share.
I will say,
what
I learned recently about whales still.
Okay.
There was this fashion trend for whales like 20, 30 years ago. Yeah, fashion trend. Whales have fashion trends.
Okay.
Where they were wearing dead salmon as hats. And they've started doing it again. And no one can figure out why.
The skin of their enemies. I love it.
You gotta read about it.
I'm gonna
because
no.
the whales,
first thing
it was
I'm
like
Googling.
30 years ago. And then it suddenly stopped. Like
They stopped.
they stopped. And now they're doing it again.